code deployment options for your Azure App Service. So we've now got this beautiful space that we can upload our code in our Azure App Service with a free Azure App Service plan. How do we actually go about deploying our code to the cloud, though? Well, there's a few different ways that we could do it, and by far the most popular one is this guy right here coming up first, the Visual Studio WebDeploy. The reason why this is just so insanely popular is because it's just so insanely easy. All you have to do is open up Visual Studio, sign in with your Azure account, and click Publish. And it asks you which Azure slot do you want to dump it in. It's just that easy. And that's what we're going to be doing in this particular nugget. We're going to be walking through that. But we're also going to talk about how to deploy using FTP and how to set up those credentials, as well as something that's really cool called Kudu. And Kudu is this back-end explorer where we can actually see the guts of what's running within our app service, as well as it gives us a place where we can edit it on the fly. Now, we can also integrate into something like Github or Azure DevOps as well, with a couple other different options using something called Source Control for continuous integration and continuous deployment. And what that basically means is once we've checked our changes in and they've been approved, we can then automatically set that up to deploy straight to our staging deployment slots, and then from there go into a testing phase where we can swap to production whenever we want. So we're going to talk about all of these in this particular nugget. I'm going to show you where to go to get started. We're going to begin by deploying some code from Visual Studio. And I am going to begin by dragging Visual Studio up onto the screen, and we're going to clone this little app service demo that I created. I basically took the .NET Core app that comes out of the box and added a couple goofy sites to it. So we'll go ahead and just clone this right here, and it'll bring up Visual Studio. And after just a moment, you can see that we have some basic items here. We've got a standard MVC, and I've added a couple different sites to it with the bear view and the datetime view. We're going to look at that a little bit more. Don't worry about it right now. Let's go ahead and get this thing deployed. After I've launched into the solution itself, I can simply right-click on the solution and choose Publish. And you can see pretty quickly it brings up this dialog box where I can choose to publish straight to an app service, whether it's existing or I can create a new one from scratch right here. Since we already have one that's existing, that's what I'm going to choose. I'm just going to choose Select Existing, and we'll continue with Publish. So you can see in the top right that it automatically signed me in to my Azure portal account with Knox at knoxsdata.com. But if you don't see it, you can just simply add an account right there and get signed in, and it'll automatically populate these items for you. You can see it detected my subscription and my resource group view. And if we expand our folder down here, check it out, we can see the application that I created in the previous nugget. So all I have to do to publish this now is click on the application itself and click OK. And it's going to begin deploying my build straight to Azure. Check it out. Can you believe how easy that was? I simply signed in, pointed to my resource, and clicked OK. So if I click Accept, you can see now it has my bear and my datetime website. I'll click on bear, and you can see, look at this magical app development that I've done here. That's it. That's all there was to doing the Visual Studio WebDeploy deployment. You simply sign in, right-click on your solution, and click Publish, point it to the app slot that you want, and you're good to go. Now, the other options that we want to talk about, I did say we were going to talk about them, and I'm going to keep my promise here. So let me just navigate over to the Azure portal, and we'll take a look at the app service that we got here. So I'll scroll on over to the right, and you can see that we are dumped right here on the overview pane. And you can see it does have right here in the bottom right-hand side of the overview pane, let me get my pen, you can see right here, it does have the option to deploy via FTP or FTPS, but we haven't set up a username for that yet. So the quick way to set that up is under the deployment section, there is a deployment center. Let's go ahead and give that a click. And you'll see this is where we can choose the different ways that we can integrate all of our other source control options into deploying straight into our Azure App Service, such as Azure DevOps, GitHub. We've got local Git that we can set up from within the portal. OneDrive, Dropbox, that's pretty cool. But then at the very bottom here, we've got FTP. So if I click on FTP and choose Dashboard, it will bring up the FTP settings that we can configure. And by default, it goes to App Credentials. It does show you the URL that you can go to. But if you need to actually set up a user account, you can click on User Credentials and set these up right here. That's how we can go ahead and set that up. Now, the other thing I did mention was something called Kudu. So let's check this out. This is really cool, and this is the easy way to get to Kudu. We're going to copy this URL here that ends in AzureWebsites.net. and I'll paste it into the web browser. But right before I press enter, I'm going to do scm.azurewebsites.net, and we'll press enter. And you can see this dumps you into the Kudu environment, which is really, really cool because now we have the ability to look at all of these settings via REST API of how we can configure and manipulate our app service environment. We have a debug console where we can look at either command or PowerShell. We have the Process Explorer itself, which shows you the running processes that are being used to run our application. It does take a couple minutes to load, but it does eventually load. And we can now see we've got, this is clearly an IIS running because it's a .exe. It's running the .NET exe and the W3 WP.exe as well. But one of the really, probably the best thing about this is under Tools, when we check out the zip push directory. Let's go ahead and give that a click, and it shows you all of the items that are being used within our directory. If I actually go into www.root, I can edit things like maybe the CSS that's running my website. For instance, if I see the site.css here, I can click the little edit button here and check it out. I now have the ability to edit my CSS directly in the Kudu website. I will have to restart my app afterwards to make this take effect, but you don't have to publish code directly from Visual Studio to make the change take effect within Azure. You can do it straight into Kudu. Now, doesn't mean you probably shouldn't do it in Visual Studio. You probably should. You should probably manipulate it that way and also check things into Source Control. Once you've made the changes, you do have the option to download that file there as well. So in this particular nugget, we have covered deploying our code via Visual Studio. We've also talked about how to set up FTP, how to access Kudu and manipulate our items from within Kudu, and how to set up Source Control using things like GitHub, Azure DevOps, Dropbox, OneDrive, and so on. I hope this has been informative for you, and I'd like to thank you for viewing.